Hello, everybody, and welcome to your weekly astrological and energy reading using the tarot for clarification on the direction in which we're heading. And you'll have to excuse me because this week I'm sitting on my exercise ball because it's more comfortable, which means that I may be rolling about or bouncing about. If you're lucky enough, you may actually see me slide off it and fall on the floor, because that occasionally happens. We'll see. Anyway, I'll try to sit still, but maybe there's something appropriate about this message for all of us, considering the fact that we are, well, at the time of this recording, we haven't quite reached it, but we are on a fast track to the summer solstice, and we also have a annular total solar eclipse that is not actually visible in North America or Western Europe or Australia, which is essentially where my viewership resides. But we will be feeling it. It's important to know that it is at 0 degrees Cancer, which is the north node that we're shifting out of. So what does that mean? Well, I suppose we could logically come to the conclusion that that is an indication that we are in not only completion, but also, of course, a brand new beginning. And the completion of that nodal cycle should have brought us to a place where we come to an understanding of our vulnerability, because Cancer is, of course, about vulnerability. It's about nurturing. It's the mother. It is knowing our own vulnerability and knowing how to ask for help, knowing how to step outside of the egoic restrictions of stubbornness through resistance. And all of this is happening at the same time as squaring Mars. And while Mars is still in Pisces, that reinforces the idea of there being a double water sign energy, which means that our frustrations and inner restrictions are causing a deep sense of emotional overwhelm. And there's something very significant about this, because as we've discussed in previous weeks, Mars will, on the 28th of June, which is only a week away at this point, shift into Aries. And once it shifts into Aries, that is its exalted position, and it means that Mars will be in its full effect of aggression, warring energy, reinforcement, reestablishment of self in the outside world through aggressive means. And that is both on the personal level and on the macro dynamic level. So, all in all, those are some pretty challenging energies, but I don't think that we need to worry too much about that on our personal journey, because I think that we're all very self-aware and fully conscious of the process that we've been on. And so therefore, maybe the most important thing is to shift our perspective from looking at Cancerian energy as victimhood, and instead see the strength that exists in vulnerability, because at the end of the day that just comes down to semantics, but it's very pivotal in terms of how we actually experience our place in the world. To be vulnerable is to know that we need outside influence and support. To be vulnerable means in turn that we have enough strength in order to acknowledge that it's our ego attachment to independence that gets in our way of communing and coming into a sense of community and support. And our tarot reading this week is very much focused on that, and we'll get into that very soon. But let's start right away with our two. I only picked two this week, two cards, because last week it was very wordy and long as a result of reading from the books, and I don't really like to do that, and I don't really feel that we're at a stage yet in our understanding of these decks to just sort of use them as indicators of energy. So I like to use the actual oracle messages. So let's start with our Sacred Destiny Oracle card of the week, and we got Delight. Both of our cards this week are birds, and both of them resemble birds that I was having a discussion about this morning with my own mother. So perhaps there's some serendipity in there to be focused on. Perhaps there's something to be said about a very specific incident that I was talking about with regard to these birds, and that's that where I live, we have two cats who were having a playful but somewhat aggressive moment with a bird that they caught that I had to rescue a couple of days ago. And I suppose if you really think about that, it's truly a metaphor for the energies of this eclipse and solstice, and what we just discussed about the Cancerian energy of vulnerability versus victimhood, and being able to accept the help of another. It's funny how that happens, right? It all just comes together. Anyway, focus, Alex. Let us find the message for Delight. Sparrows in spring grass. The sparrow gains its power from its numbers. In clusters, sparrows eat and forage, and predators are distracted and deterred, even intimidated by their numbers. Security and joy in numbers is a lesson of the sparrow. Within their community, sparrows are always busy, living life fully. Many cultures aligned the meaning of the sparrow with joy, and in the Middle Ages, the sparrow was thought to relieve suffering, help one triumph over hardships and bring joy. The sacred landscape wants you to know that delight is expanding in your life. Clap your hands with glee. Ugh, sorry. Woo! I don't know if that was gleeful enough for you. Spend time with others. Go to a community gathering. Host a party. The joy you experience will give birth to immense creativity, and your life will blossom. Share your happiness and elation with others, and it will grow by leaps and bounds. This isn't the time to be serious or buckle down and get to work. This is the time to be spontaneous and madcap. Do not make hard and fast commitments. Don't sign any legal documents or make any pledges right now. Don't make any promises, or you might not be able to keep them. Give yourself permission to have fun. Lots of fun, especially in communities with others. Well, that's very interesting too, because Mercury also has just gone retrograde, also in Cancer. So let's just focus on being present in the moment, because clearly that's all we can do right now. And eventually we're going to fully integrate and incorporate this message into our soul flow, because there's a determination, no matter what, for us to just be in acceptance and to receive rather than plan, if that makes any sense to you. The other card that we got from the Animal Oracle deck, which is not that card at all, is Sandpiper Spirit. So again, another bird. Both sparrows and sandpipers are native to where I live in Southern California. So again, it's interesting that I had that conversation specifically about birds this morning, because normally I really don't. I mean, they're beautiful, but I don't spend too much time thinking about species of birds, or whatever they're called, breeds. I don't know what are they? Anyway, something to learn about. Sandpiper Spirit is number 51, and its message is to be playful. The oracle message is that sandpipers are like cute little clowns poking their beaks into the sand before darting off to chase the waves. The appearance of Sandpiper Spirit is a sign that now is a time to engage your playfulness. Whatever tasks you have before you, perform them with a lightness of being. Explore the familiar, discovering the new in the old. Who knows what treasures await you when you let yourself laugh and have fun. Sandpiper Spirit's happy and curious nature can help you to feel rejuvenated as you remember your ability to run and fly and dance playfully. And the protection message of Sandpiper Spirit is that when your heart is heavy and life seems to weigh you down, Sandpiper Spirit message is to lighten your burden by finding joy and humor in the everyday. Become like a playful child, filled with curiosity and wonder, and soon you will find you feel your own spirit lift. A few minutes or hours of fun-filled delight is exactly what you need right now. Enjoy the ridiculousness of life and be willing to jump in. Let your inner goof out to express itself with abandon. Well, I imagine that in the week ahead, we probably will have ample opportunity to fall into the dirge and doldrums of the chaotic yet mundane repetition of historical chaos. And if you're anything like me, you're fast becoming disinterested in the sociological evolution that is on display, because you understand that nothing is really changing. Well, a lot is changing, but not in the way that the media or the majority of average Joes and Jennies are focused on. In fact, they focus on all the wrong things. The revolution is a spiritual one. It comes from inside. And while I have great empathy for those who are fighting for justice and equality, this is not something new, nor is it something that hasn't historically repeated itself over and over again. So innovation is the only way that we're going to break that status quo, and that is not something that gets invented or introduced into our lexicon and our zeitgeist overnight. Yes, of course, we should be grateful for those that wish to make progress, and certainly we should all be embodying a desire to break the chains of past values that do not serve the collective in a goal of equality and love. But as long as we make it about the outside, history will be condemned to repeat itself over and over again as a human experience. Everything that we've learned on a spiritual level about our own personal soul journeys has to be applied to the collective now. And that means that you also have to accept that you've already done a lot of work. That means that you are a few steps ahead of the moral majority, and that your energies need to be spent on taking care of yourself, embodying the values that you believe in, that you trust, and that you wish to embody and share. And if you get caught up in the darkness, the what am I trying to say? The push and pull, the tearing apart on a more terrestrial plane that is coloring the lives of so many at present, you will lose yourself and you will be eaten alive, perhaps even spiritually killed by it. And that's fine, because you will reincarnate, but it is not your purpose to be a part of a battle that keeps repeating itself. Your job is to take the information and the experiences that you have and imbue your landscape with the values that you have come to cherish and honor and understand as being fundamental to your soul journey. You will do more in a revolutionary spirit by embodying those things than you will ever do joining the masses. Everyone has their place, and I'm not trying to make this about exceptionalism, but at some point we do have to weigh our self-worth and give ourselves permission to step beyond the limitations that frustrate and imprison the general population. I will leave you to figure out what that means for you individually, because I can't tell you anything beyond what I've already just said, which is controversial within itself, I understand. But it is the truth. In our Celtic cross for the week to come, our underlying energy, the Two of Swords, this feeling of being torn between two aspects of an identity, of being perhaps even voluntarily stifled by false information that we tell ourselves. If you look at this person in many ways, I mean, there's no doubting that this person is choosing to be in this state of ignorance. They're staying very guarded and closed. You know, crossing your arms in this way is about protection. But this person is protecting themselves from their intuition in the form of the moon, their subconscious in the form of the waters behind them, the richness of earth and photosynthesis. I mean, we are all a part of photosynthesis. This is the very essence of life, and this person is grounded in the bland, this is a self-defined prison. I mean, put the fucking swords down and take the blindfold off and take a good look around and accept the circumstances and move forward. It's a false sense of choice, very much like the minor arcana and energy of the lovers. You know, it's this idea that it's choosing to be stuck when we know perfectly well what the answer is, because it's not a real choice. All we have to do is put one sword down, and then the roadway of the other sword opens up to us. And then we have our sword of truth with us, the Ace of Swords, which is a blessing. It's a new opportunity, new ideas, new intellectual pursuits, new ways of defining ourselves from our minds into the world around us in opportunity. At the heart of our reading, we have the moon. Well, we're coming up to this new moon with the eclipse. The solar eclipse corresponds to a new moon. So, very central energy in this, in fact, I mean, what more could we say? I mean, this is literally a depiction of what's happening. This is the sun, and this is the moon. You know, it is an eclipse. So, I think we should meditate for a couple of seconds or a minute on the imagery in this. I always come back to the same thing. Let's take a long look at this. We have two towers. We have Scorpio energy here coming out of the subconscious mind. This is a water sign. This is it's death, but it's the death card, but not in the sense of physical death. It's death of something within our subconscious that we're willing to let go of, and then take that information and move on this path that takes us beyond the tower into the great unknown. But in order to get there, we have to move beyond this hurdle of these dualities that exist within us, of the wolf and the dog, the tamed and the untamed, the wild and the domesticated. This eclipse has something to do with this. I mean, think of our oracle messages about the playfulness, the need to let go of the status quo and in order to rise above. Interesting. And it was crossed by the Ace of Wands. So the Ace of Wands is great inspiration, so it may be an indication that it's a good time to get creative on this, you know, take advantage of this energy. I mean, eclipse energy lasts, it lasts 6 months, but I mean, the actual intensity of the eclipse is anywhere between 2 and 6 weeks on either side of it. So I would say that, you know, at the core of it, perhaps there's a new creative opportunity to tap into. What is it that you would like to do that you could deem creative? That could be planting a new something in your garden, or it could be, well, let's take that as the metaphor, planting something in your garden. You know, use that as a metaphor for anything else in your life, something that you can foresee yourself investing in because it inspires you. In our past, we're coming out of the Two of Wands. The Two of Wands, of course, in direct opposition to the Two of Swords. So why are we in the Two of Swords energy now if we are coming out of the Two of Wands energy? Well, the Two of Wands energy is an inspired opportunity for choice. This person holds the world in their hands. They are so relaxed that they can leave one of their wands to its own devices and unattended and hold the other in contemplation of, you know, what ostensibly looks like a very calm future prospect. If we're leaving that behind, and I may take a clarifier on this, it's because, oh, thank you. The elements have made the decision for us. The Wheel of Fortune turned, it took us into a new direction. And I think if you're considering this more from the perspective in an eclipse cycle, and we look back to the last eclipse, when this cycle began in January, a lot has changed since then. I mean, nothing could be clearer than the fact that we have been in a full Wheel of Fortune process. And one has to remember, taking a good look at that Wheel of Fortune, you know, fortunes change all the time. We don't necessarily see the Wheel of Fortune and think, oh, my life is going to be fantastic. But if it's been pretty difficult for a while, chances are that shift was for the better. But that works both ways, right? Our underlying energy from the past is the Magician. So, as a result of that shift that we've just talked about from the Wheel of Fortune, and the decision of the Two of Wands, we came into an understanding of our power. Our magical power. Our knowingness. Our flow with infinity, yin and yang, and having the wand, the sword, the cup, and the pentacle at our fingertips. And then, in turn, also carrying our alchemical magic wand. And look at this manifestation, the beauty of nature. In our immediate future, the Fool. And I'm going to take a clarifier on this again, but, you know, eclipses mark new, brand new chapters. So of course it makes sense that we would have the Fool, but what does this new chapter bring? Well, as our crowning energy is the Hermit, what it seems to bring is a shift from the need to tend to ourselves after all this period of time of self-care and self-discovery into a externalization of that, making it useful, integrating it into a new process, a new creation, a new dynamism that involves the outside world, other people. The Fool, well, no. Sorry, I feel like my mind wasn't very focused when I was asking that for that clarifier, so I would like to, okay, yeah, so, the Fool clarified by first the Ten of Swords. So that's letting go, you know, the Fool energy comes when we have let go of all of the injury, all of the turmoil, the soul-based turmoil. It's coming into it's partially submission to the notion that we have been overpowered by other dynamics and outside circumstances, perhaps for our entire lifetime in this life. But no longer being dogged down by that, and in fact, actually in integrating that to the point of a graduation, getting to the graduation point, and then being like, okay, fuck this, I'm going on my new fool's journey. That's what we're heading into, so that's very exciting. So everything about these last 6 months, and perhaps even 6 years or longer, you know, maybe your entire adulthood, of being defined by all of these different external victim points. In accepting our mortality, but also our infinite life beyond this mortal body, this finite human experience in this incarnation, there's mass liberation, because whatever happens to us, good or bad, in sickness and in health, and in joy and in misery, we're no longer tethered to those things because they don't define us, because we know that there's so much beyond that. And this in turn awakens the Ace of Wands within us, which is divine inspiration. So all in all, it's a pretty exciting perspective. And we're at a very pivotal moment in that process. As for the Hermit that crowns us, this is us coming into an understanding of our own leadership principles and our own leadership journey. And the way that this is going to be reinforced for us is through communication with the outside world. Everything about this reading seems to be pointing towards the idea that, you know, the insular dynamics of our life that we've perhaps even become quite comfortable with as a result of being in lockdown and quarantine and fear of the outside world and so on and so forth. You know, this is coming not to an end in terms of like necessarily like the way that society is shifting, but partially, yes, that is a part of it, but it's really communication with I feel new energies, new it's not necessarily individuals, it's institutions, it's like having a new, in order to join a new community or in order to find new pathways, the universe provides circumstances, and in order for us to build a bridge to those circumstances, communication, which goes in both directions, is required. So that Eight of Wands that clarified the Hermit energy, I'm not sure if I even showed that. Did I show that? I think I did, yes. That's the flow. That is the magician flow. But it's when we embody the magician energy and the hermit energy, you know, we have the humility. Well, in the magician energy, we don't necessarily have the humility. We have the tools that are given to us. Then we find the humility to be in reverence to the star, but also to use the star in order to forward our own path, if that makes sense. And this ties in with this idea that the way that we're going to understand our power and the things that we've been given is by reintegrating ourselves into an external flow of community, of institution, of, that could be workplace, it could be medical facilities, it could be bureaucracy, it could be, it can be personal too. It could be finding yourself communicating a lot with key soul tribe members, for example, because there is a very spiritual dynamic to the hermit energy. In our present, as we present in our environment, we have the Nine of Wands. We had this last week. I can't remember if it was in our outcome or our psychology card, but the Nine of Wands, the depiction in the Rider-Waite deck is one that I don't always love, because it does come across as if this person is much weaker than they really are, because they seem so weary and weary, and they seem so run down and overwhelmed. But, you know, what you have to really understand about the Nine of Wands is that, you know, obviously it precedes the Ten of Wands, which is the end of the completion of the cycle. But, you know, this person is guarding the 8 wands behind them. Again, you know, let's not also forget that we just got the clarifier of the 8 of Wands, albeit from the Botticelli deck, but the progression into the 9 of Wands is one that tells us that when we've been through, you know, maybe in the past, you know, that openness to the flow of communication has been associated with trauma, or like shutting down, and a need for boundaries, and you know, that does make us feel tired and physically and mentally exhausted by the journey. But that doesn't mean that we're weak. It just means that we've been expending our energy in order to grow. And these are the fruits of his labor. They're ideas. Excuse me. But it's time to do something with this energy. We don't want to get stuck in that, you know, because we want to get to, we're always on the journey towards the 10 of Wands, you know, which is the completion and fulfillment of our emotional, inspired productivity. Can I get a clarifier on that 9 of Wands? I'm not sure if it doesn't feel as forthcoming as I want. There we go. The King of Wands. So, it's a reminder that, you know, when you've been through all of this, you know, these are essentially the same person. I mean, they don't look entirely the same in this deck, but, you know, essentially this is, you know, it's about attitude, right? Look at how this person holds their wand. They hold their wand in harmony and in flow, also in authority, in enlightenment, in trust, trusting in themselves. And this person is, you know, has a tiny little bit of 5 of Pentacles poverty consciousness to them. They need to trust that, you know, look at their wands. There's growth on all of them. So we want to embody that King of Wands energy. But what may be getting in our way of doing that is that in our environment we have the Emperor. And what that says is that we have other elements in our environment that are authoritarian. The unexamined mind doesn't unfortunately negate the authoritarian attachment to power. So, actually, the less examined a mind is, the more likely they are to cling to false self-inflated rigidity. And if we allow ourselves to constantly be influenced by and to this type of energy in other people, of course we find ourselves feeling smaller and restricted and frustrated, and I don't wish to denigrate the Emperor or Capricorns for that matter, but there's a lot of Capricornian energy in that Emperor, and of course so much of what is causing tumult in our outer world balance is about our relationship to authority and how we want to collapse that paradigm, that authority paradigm, because it doesn't work. Because, the more we evolve, especially in terms of spiritual enlightenment and ascension and, moving into fifth dimensionality, the less we require that, because the Nine of Cups, which clarifies that Emperor, is about emotional self-fulfillment. So if we feel challenged by people or restrictions in our environment, authoritarian restriction in our environment, if we see that as an obstacle, it's because we're out of alignment with our emotional self-fulfillment. And I understand why, because in our psychology and self-awareness sector, we have the Seven of Cups. So this is the unknowingness when we feel overwhelmed with choice or with a lack of direction, which, that pretty much at this point, I think this is the description of the old paradigm of our society. This is what living in our world has felt like for the last at least 10 years, if not 20. It's like not having any attachment to our inner life because of the fact that there's so many distractions outside of us and so many false promises, so many inflated, illusory goals served to us through institutionalized thinking, through that Emperor, Capricornian energy. It's like the Hierophant, like being a traditionalist and actually conforming to tradition because it's the status quo, not because it makes sense, right? So when we find our mind in the Seven of Cups energy, that's almost going into a poverty consciousness headspace of not being able to do anything because we're so caught up in the false choice presented to us. We think we have 7 options, but again, I'll put it in layman's terms. All we have to do is actually look at the depiction in the Rider-Waite and look at what's in all of those cups. Which ones of those cups would you actually choose? You know? And I imagine that, you know, there's a correlation with the idea of the 7 deadly sins, you know, but I mean, we understand the desire for victory, but that cup comes with a skull on it. Here we have a dragon. Here we have the temptation of the materialistic perspective. Here we have a tower that is awaiting, you know, we build these towers, but they fall, right? This is vanity turning to stone. Here's a snake. Here's... I have no idea what that's meant to be, but perhaps some kind of ghost or whatever, you know. It's probably being in, you know, caught in attachment to the idea of the things that we could have had that didn't work out for us, the man that got away, the woman that got away, the opportunity that got away, you know. It's like being haunted by that. All of these, actually, when you really think about them, are false choices. And how is it clarified? By the King of Swords. So this is, you know, we don't need a million choices, or 7 choices even, when we are in our truth. And the King of Swords knows his truth. And he doesn't need to fight for his truth. He's always ready to, but he doesn't need to because he embodies it. And when he's in alignment with his truth, when we are, we focus on using our intellect and our capacity for thought to build upon our own foundation rather than looking outside of ourselves for somewhere else to build. We know that the answer is inside of us, that the opportunities will always present themselves, and it's what we do with the opportunity that counts, because it's our mind that creates the experience. And our outcome, the 3 of Cups. So this pretty much sums up everything that we've talked about, you know, the playfulness of the Sandpiper Spirit and the social dynamic that was described by the light, you know, the community dynamic that is required in order to reach fulfillment. And it's about trust. It's about trusting. Soul tribe energy. I don't know. That's what's coming to me, is that, you know, this soul tribe energy is coming as a result of all of this. And what do we get? We get these. And I'm taking this as a clarification of the ending of this. And we got a similar message last week. You know, the 3 of Cups, that communion, that community, that fun, that joy, that celebration, that, you know, understanding that no matter what's going on in our world or in our lives, with our health, with our body and mind and our heart, you know, the missing parts or the parts that aren't working at their best, this all gets compensated for when we are in unison, when we find this community, when we invest in this community, when we invest in communication and joyful playfulness that involves other human beings or animals, but living beings. And we do this in communion with nature, of course, too. Always the third party. Cannot exist without it. We live on our spaceship, which is Mother Earth, nature. So, what did this clarify? The end of this energy, the Five of Swords. This, again, it's letting go of this energy. This person is the way that they are because they've fought all of these battles and they feel the need to defend their ideas and their, the choices that they've made in their life, because they have poverty consciousness knocking at their door because of psychological conditioning by trauma throughout a lifetime or many lifetimes. And this in turn puts us in the position where the more we accomplish, rather than being in joy and fulfillment over those accomplishments, we're exhausted and broken, and we're focused on all of the things that we lost, or all of the things that we feel we can no longer experience as a result of that, of the accomplishments, which of course is it's a paradox within itself, but it's because our mental prison attaches us to that idea of defensiveness, of standing firm in front of our boundaries. Now, boundaries are very important, of course, and we've talked a lot about that because a lot of the process of the last year has been about learning healthier boundaries in order to fully thrive. But, it's an awkward process. So, the only way to move beyond it is to get rid of this fighting spirit that fights out of instinct, and therefore potentially also means that we end up fighting ourselves. And the world tells us that's come to an end. So we start with the indication that in our future we're going on this new journey, the Fool's Journey, the very beginning of that, the ending of the Ten of Swords. Well, we get that mirrored in this end, but just with that extra kind of clarification that when we get the ending in the form of the world, that is the idea of a karmic leveling up, and that karmic leveling, what am I saying? Leveling, that's what I'm trying to say. Goodness gracious me. It's an ego death, again, because Five of Swords is all about ego. It's wanting to win the battle at any cost. Being so focused on the idea of winning, of being the best, of being better than. Well, when we get stuck in the idea of being better than other people, and that we want to prove that to ourselves, ultimately, we only limit ourselves, right? Because it doesn't matter. There's always going to be somebody else who thinks that they're better than you. There's always somebody else that's going to think that what they wrote, what they sang, what they, the report that they did, the experience that they had of their healing, that it's better than yours. Because it's theirs, and they're caught in their ego juice, You're not anymore. And you're going to find that you flourish and expand enormously as a result of letting go of that, because it just doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter in here. So it certainly isn't going to matter here anymore. But we have to unlearn all of that conditioning that, we still have those knee-jerk responses where, protect the ego, but the truth is, when you stand in your own energy, and we certainly have, we have the King of Swords, we have the King of Wands, and the bottom of our deck as it stands is just looking at me right now, the King of Pentacles. So, the fact that this isn't on the table right now tells me that, that will be the next step, is material kingdom, like that's starting to manifest in a more tangible manner in our lives. For now, our energies are based in inspiration and intellectual truth. Anyway, I think all of this was pretty self-explanatory, so I'm not going to go into any further details. I wish you enormous luck in dealing with all of this eclipse energy, and happy solstice to you, wherever you may be, whichever season you're shifting to. There's opportunity in all seasons, and we have a beautiful journey ahead of us, but we also have a lot of work to do. So let's do our very best to focus on getting ourselves to this place, because humans are not built to be alone or to be an island. So we merge together with our soul tribe through all these experiences. I hope this was clear to you. I hope that there's information in this that will be helpful to you on your journey, and I look forward to sharing more information with you in the immediate future. I'm still working on my meditation. I just don't wish to do a meditation that resembles what other people do. I want something that is unique and purposeful. We can all meditate, we know how to do that, but I want to find something that is unique, and I haven't found it yet. I'm stuck in the idea phase, so I guess I can take a little bit of my own advice and actually focus on doing something. I send you lots of love, peaceful and harmonious energy flow from me to you. Have a wonderful week. Namaste.